Today's show is brought to you by Audible, and right now you can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/joined-up. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle or MP3 player. Thanks for tuning in to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, a weekly show featuring interviews with fantastic authors sharing their personal stories on how and why they write. There's hints and tips for aspiring writers and great book reviews from top bloggers. Follow us on Twitter at JU Podcast. Right, cue the cheesy theme tune.
Put down your pen and stop your typing. Grab yourself a drink, 'cause it's Joined Up Writing.
Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, where a little procrastination can go a long way. I'm Wayne Kelly and it's episode 75, and today I'm talking to friends of the show, Nathan O'Hagan and M.W. Leeming, Wayne to his friends, about small presses and in particular their very own Obliterati press. I've also got a new review from Bibliomaniac, Catherine Sunderland in Book Bloggers Corner, and another listener's spotlight featuring Elizabeth Downing Potts. Okay, a quick check-in from me before we dive into the interview. I've still got my head down, working on the novel, and the new words just keep on coming. I wrote another 1,300 right before sitting down to record this, actually. And as with all first draft type stuff, the new chapters are a bit rough around the edges, but I'm lucky enough to be a member of an excellent local critique group, and I've been getting some useful feedback. I keep waking up early with new scenes and character revelations, and this is what happens when you keep chipping away at your novel on a daily basis, rather than leaving days or weeks between each writing session, which I mentioned recently, and I definitely recommend that. And something else that woke me at 3:30 a.m. one day this week, and it wasn't my cat for a change, was an idea for a script that I'm going to start work on. It's actually based on the premise I had for a novel, but I've been trying to come up with something original to form the basis of a spec script, because that's what I kind of want to work on next, and I think this is it. The challenge for me now is to hold off writing it until I've finished the beta version of my book. I just don't want to get sidetracked, even though I'm desperate to get started. And to be honest, I'm always like this when the next new shiny idea comes along, but I think I need to demonstrate a bit of self-discipline, knuckle down, focus on the job in hand. Maybe if I was a full-time writer, it might be a bit different, but with my day job and the novel, there's only so much room in my little head, not to mention hours in the day. But what about you? Are you regularly tempted away from your work in progress by the latest new idea? Do you just drop everything and go for it anyway? Or do you try to keep all these different things going at the same time? Maybe you thrive on that. What projects have you got on at the minute? I'd love to hear from you, so drop me a line at wayne@waynekellywrites.com, tweet me at JUPodcast, or head over to the Facebook page. And also, don't forget, please, it would be fantastic if you can go to Apple Podcasts or iTunes or whatever you know it by, and just take 30 seconds to leave a quick iTunes review and rating. It takes seconds, it makes a massive difference to the show and helps us get seen by more people and listened to, and then I can keep pushing the show and doing new things with it. Okay, so let's hear this week's interview with Nathan O'Hagan and M.W. Leeming. After spending most of his teens and 20s in various unsuccessful bands, Nathan turned his hand to writing, and in 2013 he self-published a short fiction collection, Purge. A year later he completed his first novel, The World Is Not a Cold Dead Place, and he was published by Armley Press, followed in 2017 with Out of the City. Both excellent novels. M.W. Leeming, a fellow Wayne, I feel your pain, brother. Following a career in criminal law, Wayne pursued one of his many creative pursuits, which was writing. As well as having self-published a number of collections and novellas, Wayne is traditionally published with Armley Press as well, who put out his excellent vigilante revenge thriller, Justice is Served. And it was meeting through Armley that led Nathan and Wayne to forming Obliterati Press in 2017, with their debut release, Lord of the Dead, from recent guest Richard Rippon. As ever, it was great fun to chat to both of them. Okay, thanks for joining me both, Nathan and Wayne. Hope you're both well. How's things been going in the world of Obliterati and your own projects and stuff?
Been pretty good so far. We had a nice launch in Newcastle for our first book, Lord of the Dead. Obviously, we had Richard on recently as well, didn't you? So yeah. He was telling you all about that. That's done pretty well so far. sold good, couple of hundred copies or so, which I think is not bad going for a first book from a new press, and it's been keeping us busy.
Yeah.
I think Wayne, it's probably maybe taken up even more time than we thought. I think especially for Wayne, because he does all the kind of technical things. He does the website, and he does all the sort of copy editing and formatting and everything like that. So I think Wayne probably bears a bit more of the brunt of it than I do, to be honest, don't you, Wayne?
From that point of view, I possibly do, but I think it's felt like it more so since we opened the submissions window. It gave us a fair bit more to read, didn't Nathan? And from that submissions window, and from other submissions as well, it's generated quite a bit of work that we're keen to get out there. So it's felt like, since having launched last year, I'd say since Richard's launch, we've been quite busy.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Well, why don't we just take a step back then? Just tell us, I know we kind of touched on this in Nathan's original interview recently, but Wayne, why don't you tell us sort of how Obliterati Press came about in the first place, and why you wanted to start your own press?
Yeah, it's been something that I've had an interest in for a while, and I've always gravitated to self-publishing. Sort of Armley Press was the first experience for me, and Nathan as well, I think, of being published by somebody else. But I've always liked being in control of what readers see in terms of the product, and so for that reason, I quite fancied for a while starting up my own press, but it was looking for somebody really that was, like-minded enough to go into it with me, because I knew it wasn't something I'd be able to do on my own. My strength really is going through things with a fine-tooth comb and formatting and all that sort of stuff, actually creating, the product, whereas I knew that I wouldn't be quite so good with the promotional side of things, reaching out and contacting people. And it was meeting Nathan at the launch for my book, which was combined with the press panel in Leeds, that kind of kick-started it, really, because we got talking about it, and I sort of hassled him over Facebook and things like that, saying, we really should do it, take control of our own work and see what we can do with it. And he eventually saw that it was something that we could do. I think you were a little bit reluctant, although I think you saw that it was a good idea, didn't you, Nathan?
I was. I mean, it was something I'd thought about. I mean, as we said when we were having a curry with John and Mark, like the indie record label thing, that was something I'd always imagined doing when I was more into music. Mm-hmm. And then as I moved more into writing, it was something that had occurred to me, but I just never thought it was really possible to do. I just didn't think it was feasible. And then, the more we talked about it, and it started off almost as a joke, really, just like over a curry and a couple of pints, before we were doing your book launch. Mm. The idea just kind of grew and grew, and eventually it became a case of why not do it rather than why do it, because Wayne has got a fair bit of design skills, and as he says, he's a very good editor. He's good at that kind of thing, the technical side of thing, which is not something I particularly excel at. So once we kind of came to the idea that we wanted to do it, I thought, what can I sort of bring to the table if Wayne's going to do the technical side? And we thought, well, I knew a couple of writers who were unpublished and who I knew were talented, and I thought that could be my contribution, is finding what we're actually going to put out, and then I can do the social media side and the promotion side and that kind of thing, and that can be my contribution. But I think pretty early on it was clear we were going to complement each other quite well. We've got skills that balance each other out pretty well. Wayne's good at things that I'm no good at. I wouldn't say Wayne's no good at the side of stuff that I take care of, but it's probably more something that's more natural to me than it is to Wayne. So
I would say that.
Pretty well, pretty nicely. And we've got similar taste as well, which is obviously a plus. We don't agree 100% everything that we like, when it comes to books, films, music, or whatever. But there's definitely a pretty large
kind of sort of a common sensibility there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you mentioned the music thing, that was kind of what I was going to ask you, because I know you've both sort of had dalliances with like myself, with music and stuff in the past, and there is a lot of overlap, isn't there, with that idea, like this idea, like an indie record label type thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Was that the same for both of you? That kind of punk ethic and just sort of like just go and do it sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that. Sorry.
No, go on, Wayne.
I was just going to say, I think in many respects it's something that you've probably always had that ethos, but for me it was kind of seeing what Armley were doing and making it sort of firm in my mind that it was something that we could do. That whole punk ethos of two guys just kind of doing it on their own against the system and all that sort of thing.
Like Wayne says, working with them and seeing how kind of it can be done and how simply it can be done in lots of ways that, cut out the need for, heavy, finance or any kind of like real financial investment or whatever. That's it kind of inspired me, I think, to think, well, okay, if they can do it, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, and I'm sure Mick would agree, if they can do it, then, anyone can, sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I think they'd agree that, having spoken to Mick, like you say, I think that he's kind of very much of that ethos, isn't he? It's like, just go and do it sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like the old punk rock thing of that old sniffing glue fanzine where it had a picture of a barcode that said, here's a chord.
Exactly,
here's another, here's a third, now go form a band.
Yeah.
Down to its most simple elements, and it's the same with publishing. It can be done in that kind of very minimalistic punk rock kind of way. So
why you? Obviously, I know Wayne, you've had a go at independently publishing some of your own work. Why not? Get teamed together. And I know probably Obliterati further down the line, I'm guessing that you probably will do more of this with your own stuff as well. But did you not ever think at a time, well, why don't we just get our heads together and just independently start publishing our own stuff? Or was it always like, no, we want to be a press and we want to get other people's stuff out there first?
Really, initially it was about finding other people. I think we both agreed on that. We both wanted to pursue our writing at the same time, but concentrate our efforts with regards to the press on finding other writers, and particularly, writers that haven't been published yet, or, writers that haven't had a great deal of success, maybe. That's where my interests always lied and still do, with finding new writers.
Was it the same for you, Nathan?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't ever really something I thought about us doing our own work through, although, you never say never sort of thing. But certainly, at least to begin with, the thing for me was the fact that, although on the one hand you could say, why have yet another indie press, because there are so many. Mm-hmm. But then you see like the quality of submissions that we had. There weren't a huge amount, but, we got a fair few, and there was a pretty high standard overall. Mm-hmm. I think, there's that many good writers out there who are unpublished, not even on the verge of being published, and some who maybe need a little bit of help, like with editing and things, and to like shape the work a bit more, but with genuine talent who've really got no hope of being picked up by a major. And you think, well, why not have it yet another press out there to find people like this, because there's so many talented writers out there, and you only have to look at the quality of the first two novels we're putting out with Lord of the Dead and The Baggage Carousel later this month. It's such good work. I think that's why you want to do it, is to find people like that who otherwise wouldn't have a chance really of getting published, because it's so hard to get an agent or a publisher or anything.
Well, does it? I mean, have you found? Obviously, I spoke to Richard Rippon, as you said, he's been on the show recently, and he talked about he'd had quite a frustrating experience, over the years with getting an agent, but then just kind of falling at the final hurdle and not quite being able to, get his work published by a traditional publisher or whatever for whatever reason, even though it'd been picked up by an agent and happened more than once, that kind of thing. Do you find this similar sorts of stories from the people that you've been getting involved with, and have you guys had sort of some of those similar experiences?
Yeah, well, I had quite a few of those sort of near sort of bigger publishers before I eventually found Armley Press. So I know how frustrating that is, to get it's just not being open for you. And yeah, I mean, Richard is a classic example. His first novel, which he ended up self-publishing. We say, this is Lord of the Dead is his debut novel. It's his debut, published by someone else. But his first one, it won a new writing. Yeah, and it's really good. It's a really good crime novel. And even with that, with a New Writing North award behind him and an agent, and then another novel to follow it up, even he didn't manage to break that barrier of getting through to the major publishers. It's incredibly frustrating when
he nearly did, didn't he? He was nearly there. There was some sort of disagreements over some certain details, but I think
he did. Yeah, he talked with me about it. I think that they kind of wanted him to change quite a major part of the. No, I can't remember exactly what it was. It might have been like change the protagonist to female protagonist or something. He got a male protagonist or vice versa, something like that. But I mean, do you find? What about you, Wayne? Have you sort of had similar experiences, or you've kind of seen that yourself?
Yeah, well, I've certainly heard loads of stories from other writers, and I have had a couple myself. My first book, Justice is Served, I wrote. I think it was back in 2013, and it tickled the interest of various agents who sort of hummed and hawed about it. And I had, Random House have got these online digital imprints. I can't remember what they're called now. They've got 4 of them, haven't they? Hydra, Alibi. Alibi, the imprint, were interested in it, but then the chap that was corresponding with me left, and somebody else took his job and showed no interest in it. So, it did come close a few times.
That's quite common. That's quite a common story, isn't it?
The
change of personnel. Yeah.
It was quite frustrating, but I got there in the end with Armley, which obviously I was grateful for. And I have self-published a lot of my own work simply because I like to maintain control over the physical output. But it's one of those things, and I think a lot of writers out there are experiencing the same thing. And there are a lot of small presses, but I think that the more that there are, the merrier, because we're all sort of working towards the same goal, which is to bring good writers a bit of attention, if we can, where ordinarily they may not get any because of the way that the publishing industry works.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think some of the major issues are? Why do you think it does seem quite narrow in the sort of mainstream market? What do you think the issue is? Particularly with, I mean, I'm not sure about your second writer, because I don't know that much about your second writer yet. I'm hoping we'll get him on the show at some time. But like particularly with northern writers and stuff like that, do you think there's a bit of a dearth of northern voices in mainstream publishing?
I think there's a dearth of northern voices in mainstream everything, whether it's in cinema or on TV. I mean, I was listening to Christopher Eccleston being interviewed on, I think it was Radio 4 or something, maybe on Front Row or something like that. And he's playing Macbeth, and he's saying it's only the fact that he's now a big star because he's been in Doctor Who and things like that, someone with an accent like his has got any chance whatsoever of playing a part like that. And he said, for years he just wasn't allowed anywhere near Shakespeare, and and he was typecast because of his regional accents. And you look at most of the big British actors, they're all Eton boys, like Redmayne and Damien Lewis and Dominic West and all them, all great actors and everything, but where are the sort of authentic northern voices that, or just regional voices, not even necessarily northern, but southern sort of working class or northern voices. There's just none anywhere, and I think it's very much the same in publishing. It's all very London centric, isn't it? It's all primarily based down there in London in the southeast. Any kind of northern voice, northern accent, northern dialect, it's like a complete foreign language to them, and I think they just don't know what to do with it a lot of the time.
Sorry, that was low hanging fruit. That was sorry. I completely agree. It's like you say, especially bearing in mind anybody that's from London. I'm northern and I'm only in the Midlands, but I know exactly what you're saying.
There is this perception, isn't there, of the north-south divide, and when you think that a lot of the creative industries are controlled from London, I suppose it's not acceptable, but it's understandable that the north-south divide kind of manifests in that sort of prejudice towards northern creative output, and that's why people like Armley Press and various other small publishers are doing a good thing in trying to break that down.
There's like Dead Ink and Wrecking Ball Press and things like that. There's quite a few really good publishers that do a lot of work with northern writers, or they're based in the north. So, we hope that'll offset, the imbalance.
Okay, let's pause there to take a quick break and grab a review in this week's Book Bloggers Corner. Today, Catherine Sunderland, aka Bibliomaniac, is reviewing The Other Woman by Sandy Jones.
This is the BBC Book Bloggers Corner.
The Other Woman by Sandy Jones. Prepare to meet the other woman. There's nothing she won't do to keep you away from her son. Emily thinks Adam is perfect, but lurking in the shadows is a rival, a woman who shares a deep bond with the man she loves. Emily chose Adam, but she didn't choose his mother, Pammy. There's nothing a mother wouldn't do for her son, and now Emily is about to find out just how far Pammy will go to get what she wants. Emily gone forever. This is a really great domestic thriller which takes the one person who can strike fear, frustration or irritation into anyone's life, the mother-in-law. This irresistible blurb, whether you have a mother-in-law or not, and whatever your relationship with your mother-in-law is, promises something a little bit different, but with all the ingredients of a well-paced, well-judged domestic noir thriller. The title is playfully misleading, and I like that actually the woman threatening Emily is Adam's mother, rather than another woman of her own age. The relationship between the fiancée and her prospective mother-in-law is an internally complex one, and a fascinating starting point for the novel. Jones' novel is fluent, fast-paced, full of provocative characters and with a clever twist. It will have you fist-pumping, shouting at the pages, nodding your head in empathy with the main character, as well as giving you pins and needles as you sit on the edge of your seat for the whole duration of the novel. The exploration of themes such as obsession, love, marriage, and the relationship between Emily, Pammy, and Adam is engaging and well presented with authenticity. All readers will be able to identify with something within this book, and even if not, will enjoy meeting these characters who create strong emotive responses from you whether you like it or not. This is an addictive read, a gripping read, and very well written. It's a book to read in one go and to relish and enjoy. I recommend.
Book Bloggers Corner.
There you go, The Other Woman by Sandy Jones, and you can find a link to that in the show notes along with a link to Catherine's blog that's packed full of great book reviews and recommendations. And while we're still on a break, let's take a couple of minutes just to shine a light on what one of our listeners has been up to in Listener Spotlight. This week it's one of our American listeners, Elizabeth Downing Potts, and her debut novel, Berkeley Girl. Berkeley Girl follows Mary Beth on her path of self-discovery from a small, quiet LA college to the tumultuous campus of UC Berkeley in 1967. Through a twisted path of love affairs, student protests, a friend's sad return from Vietnam, and her brother's obsession with the draft resistance movement, Mary Beth searches for her own place in the world. Through a haze of drugs, rock and roll, and rioting in the streets, Mary Beth Malone never stops asking herself the most important question of her life: where do I belong? Elizabeth has been writing short stories for as long as she can remember. She was raised in San Diego, but it was her experience at UC Berkeley in the late 60s that led to her becoming involved in the anti-war movement. She remained in the Bay Area for many years, where she worked as a high school English teacher and now resides in Santa Cruz, California, with her husband, David. She's currently working on a second novel that takes place during the American Sanctuary movement in the 1980s. Berkeley Girl has already had some great reviews on Amazon, and you can find a link to it in the show notes. So thanks again to Elizabeth, and good luck with your book. But what about other listeners? Maybe you've got a book or writing related project you want to shout about. So drop me a line at wayne@waynekellywrites.com and I'll do my best to feature you in a future listener spotlight. Okay, back to the interview, where I asked Nathan and Wayne about their small press influences. Obviously, aside from your own experience with Armley, were you inspired by any other particular small presses? You thought, I like what they're doing or how they're doing it?
Yeah, Wrecking Ball in particular, you look at the kind of work they sort of quietly put out, but, really high quality writing, primarily focused in the north. We also said, me and Wayne, that although we're both northerners, by birth, I mean, I live down in the Midlands as well now with Mark. Wayne lives in Somerset. Mm-hmm. We've definitely got a fondness for northern writing because we are northerners, but we did say we don't want to just be focused on northern writers or northern writing, wherever it comes from and whoever it's from. We want as many different diverse voices as possible. We want to have a really diverse roster if we can. It's just so far it happens that the first two are northern, and I think the next couple after that will be northerners as well.
But it also goes for the issue of men and women, doesn't it? I mean,
which we'd
really like to ensure that we're not perceived as a male-only small press because of the fact that all of our writers currently are male. We know that there are good writers out there who are female, but we just haven't had that many submissions from women.
Worked out, it's not a deliberate thing. We're not focusing deliberately on like northern blokes. We've
sure
said to each other, we want female writers, we want LGBTQ writers, on everything. But all that matters ultimately is the quality of the work. But it happens that we've been inundated with hairy arse blokes so far.
Well, it's early days as well, isn't it? I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, when did you officially? When was Obliterati officially born?
It was
June. We kind of launched the website. Been talking about it for a couple of months, but I think the website went live and we sort of announced it to the world. I think June. So it's well under a year. Still,
yeah, so you're not even a year old yet. So and you've got as you say, your second book's coming out shortly. So you mentioned a little bit about division of labour and kind of who does what. But I mean, how have you found? Obviously, you've both got other lives outside. You've got your own writing. You've both got work and family lives and things. So how do you fit it in around everything?
With great difficulty for the most part. I mean, when I've been on before, I talked about how much I struggle to set myself like a set day for writing and how much I struggle to be self-disciplined. So obviously this is another thing to add into it. So it's not easy, but you have to be very creative with your time. I mean, like I say, Wayne does take responsibility for most of the technical stuff, but I've still got to read everything that we're putting out, and we've got to go back and forth with ideas. We'll do the odd Skype call here and there and things like that, and lots of email, lots of groups on Twitter or Facebook between ourselves and whichever writer we're focused on at the time. So I think that's developing as well. I think as we grow, we'll hopefully find more of a system, or certainly I hope I'll find more of a system. But so you have to be creative with your time, like little bits of time in work. On my lunch break today, I've just finished reading what will be, I think, our fourth novel. And, I've just read a draft of that, and I'm just sort of like taking pictures. I've got it on my Kindle, and I'm taking pictures of spelling errors and things like that, which I can then at some point, put into a group with Wayne and Ben, the writer, and, work it out that way. So it's a lot of it's done on the fly and, kind of improvising, but I think Wayne's probably a bit more, he has a lot more self-disciplined than me, I would say.
Well, I think given that you work a full-time job, I don't think you do too badly there, mate. Because I do inundate you with a lot of messages. I'm constantly sort of banging out messages to him, and I sometimes think, oh God, he must get sick of hearing from me. But that's the difference, because I don't have a full-time job, so I've got more time to do that sort of stuff. But I've said before in some of the messages that I get quite restless and bored and frustrated when I've not got anything to do, and then when I've got all these jobs, I sort of ramp up into sort of high anxiety kind of flying through it kind of state, which I quite enjoy actually. I quite like it like that. And as Nathan says, I do the website, edit and format the books and do some of the artwork and things like that. So I find it probably easier than Nathan does, simply because I've got more time home here, other than when I'm doing the school runs and things,
And Wayne, how have you found as regards, like you mentioned, some of the technical skills there, which I'm guessing you had some of them before or whatever, but just both of you in general, have you found that you've had to pick up lots of new skills to do this? Have you, and kind of where have you got a lot of those extra skills from? Was there a bit of a learning curve with some of it?
I think there's always a learning curve, isn't there, with anything you do, and this, has been no different. There's things I've learned about using the Word software, about using Photoshop. I think there's always things to learn, and when you look back on these things, you could probably forever sort of pick holes in what you've done previously. What about you, Nathan?
Yeah, I think for me, I've had to learn to read, not just as a reader, but also as an editor or a publisher or whatever. You spot like the odd little spelling mistake in a book that you read, and it doesn't necessarily bother you that much. You just keep going if you're enjoying the story. But every time I spot something in something of ours that we're hoping to put out, you've got to start make a note of it and think, well, what would sound better there, or if it's like a simple punctuation or spelling thing or whatever, you make a note of it. But if it's something like a certain phrase and you're not happy with, you're kind of trying to work at how it would sound better. So yeah, it's just reading it with a different eye, I suppose, rather than just as a reader who's just enjoying reading the book. I've had to learn to look at it that way, which is probably a bit more difficult than it sounds, really. Everyone spots errors when they're reading things, but just to be like examining it in that slightly different mindset, I think is more challenging than I would have thought.
I would imagine it's, to a certain extent, it's a little bit like when you do the first lot of editing on your own projects, because you kind of have to keep changing hats, don't you? The first time you edit after your first draft, the first time you look at it, you're not looking at like line edits and punctuation and spellings. You're looking at like, does the story fit together, and have I got any massive plot holes, and does it actually make sense, and does it work? And then the next time you say, or it might not be the next time, but whatever, the next third or fourth time you look at it or whatever, you're looking at more like those, those forensic little things, like you say, is the comma in the right place? Have I spelt that word correctly or whatever? So I should imagine it's kind of like that. How have you found, both of you found, well, it sounds like, Wayne, you do a lot of the editing, but how have you found that side of it in terms of, sounds like you enjoy it, but
I do, yeah.
What about giving the feedback to the author? How have you found that?
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I enjoy giving feedback, but I am always slightly concerned that it may not be taken
in the right vein, if you in the right spirit that it's intended.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, for example, when we were looking at Richard's first book, there was quite a lot of sentence structure that I added my contribution to, just to make things flow a bit better for the reader. But there was a particular issue with the plot revolving around the time of year that the novel occurs in, and star signs and things like this.
I think he mentioned this in his interview, actually, not in his detail, but he said basically, it basically had a not mistake, but it was kind of it was kind of had a big effect on it. It was like a ripple effect on the rest of it.
Indeed, because the one of the crucial issues around the plot he'd written it at the wrong time of year, and I had to flag this up with him. And of course, what that meant was, firstly, we had to check with various astronomical websites to make sure that I was right. I was pretty confident I was, but it meant that he had to then go back and rewrite great chunks of the book. And I thought, oh dear, I didn't want to upset him. But I think ultimately it was the right thing to do.
It was, that the book to be the best book that it can be, and it would be no good him writing this great story if then someone picked it up and thought, well, that's completely inaccurate because that doesn't happen at this time of year. And then it leaves kind of credibility. Also, it's to help the book be as good as it possibly can be and help the writer. But yeah, obviously you worry that you're going to hurt people's feelings for one thing. And there's also the possibility that it might be a book you really like, really want to put out, but you need this changing. But they disagree with you and they might say, well, no, I'm not going to.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, obviously you've probably either been on the end of some of those kind of decisions yourselves, or you've talked to other people that Richard mentioned not with the book that you published, but his first book, he had issues, and it's kind of why he didn't end up getting published or whatever. So have you had anything, not to that extent where you've obviously literally fallen out with the author or whatever, but have you had like a few sort of contentious things, and kind of, how have you gone? Have you kind of had to have a bit of a debate about it? How's that kind of panned out?
So far, it's all been okay from what I can think of. I mean, it did make a lot of work for Richard with Lord of the Dead, but he was happy to do it, or willing to do it, and knew that it was the right thing to do. With the baggage carousel, it was so good, at the stage we got it at. There wasn't a great deal to be done. There's just a little bit here and there. Really, it was so good and at such an advanced stage.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the case with most things. It's been primarily like the sort of formatting, Wayne getting it how he wants it to look on the page or on the Kindle. He formats them separately for each format. But I think we've been very lucky. There's changes needed to be made to most of them, and additions we wanted or whatever. But it's all been well received so far.
As you say, it sounds like the first sort of few manuscripts that you're kind of publishing have been a little bit later on down the line. There probably have been kind of stories or whatever, or books that have been kind of kicking around and been worked on, for quite some time. They're not like messy first draft kind of things.
Yeah, I think we've read one or two messy first drafts, haven't we?
In submissions.
Yeah. Rejected outright, or a couple, we gave some feedback and say, maybe at some point in the future this would be worth resubmitting if and when we have another submissions window kind of thing. But on the whole, the quality of the stuff we've received has been very high.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, if the story's good and the general, quality of the writing's good, then sometimes a little bit of a messy document isn't that big of an arseache,
Yeah. You're willing to see through that. Well, for the epilogue, I'm going to ask you a little bit more specifically about the submission side of things. So you've mentioned it a couple of times there. So you mentioned that tell us what the next book out is, and I mean, by the time this comes out, I think Dave's book will be out. So tell us about that.
Yeah, it's 23rd of March. It's out. So yeah, it may well already be out by the time this gets broadcast. But it's a brilliant novel. I know Dave from the Autonomy website, which I think I've mentioned to you before. The old HarperCollins online writers group, and he'd put bits of the baggage carousel up, as I did, with bits of what eventually became The World's Not a Cold Dead Place, and we both liked each other's work. And when me and Wayne set up and I said, I'd go and find us a couple of writers to get started, Dave was one of the two that I thought of, along with Richard. And I remembered it being really good. I hadn't read the whole thing. I'd read maybe a third of it, if that. And I asked him to send it to us, and we were both blown away by not just how good it was, but also what an advanced stage it was at. We'd obviously edited it a few times, and it's funny. It's visceral. It's very dark. It's got a twisted sense of humour, but there's a genuine love story at the heart of it. But it's a very twisted love story. It's not your typical romance at all. It's a kind of a travelogue novel about this guy who spends most of his time traveling around all the weird and wonderful locations of the world. It's primarily set in while he's travelling around Africa and meets this girl from Australia, and as their relationship develops, the effect it has on him, and it also flashes back to things that have happened in his past. He's one of those great lonely men of the main character. Dan Roberts, his name is. I said he's equal parts Ian Banks's Frank, Mersault's The Outsider, and Zeus's The Grinch. You know, he's just one of the great archetypal, angry young men of literature. You know, he's brilliant. It's a great character, and it's a great book. It's got real cult potential at the very least, and I would hope it's got the potential to cross over, because he's such a strong, identifiable lead character, and Amber, the female lead character, the sort of second lead character, is also a really well-drawn character. I think that's one of the things we were most impressed at, how well drawn the two main characters were.
Absolutely.
The voice they had, and it's just brilliant. I can't wait for people to read it. You know, I was really excited about Lord of the Dead, and I am with this as well. It's a very different type of book, but I think people are going to really love it. You know, I can't wait for it to be in people's hands.
So that's The Baggage Carousel by Dave Olner, is that right?
That's 23rd of March that's out, so yeah, I say probably out by the time people are listening to this.
It will be, yeah, so make sure they can head over. And on that subject, as we wrap things up, so tell us where people can find out more about Obliterati.
Well, we're on social media, Facebook and Twitter, probably mainly Twitter, at Obliterati Press. The website's obliteratipress.com, and you can find out about our writers, what we've got coming up there, and any future submission windows for any authors out there who are interested in submitting in the future, and more details of other writers we've got coming up. We've got Russ Litton in May, hopefully, which obviously we're very pleased to have him, because he's a very well respected writer. He's one of my favourite writers, so I'm really pleased that we've managed to get him for our next book after Dave, and then a couple of other things that will take us probably up to the end of the year and maybe into early new year. Other things we're excited about, which we'll announce, you know, as and when they're all sort of finalised.
Brilliant.
We're also constantly open for short story submissions for the website, and also guest blog posts as well. So, you know, we just want to let people know to keep those coming in as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I'll put all that in the show notes as well, along with your guys' own personal contact details for Twitter and all that kind of stuff. But for the time being, thanks very much for coming on Joined Up Writing.
No worries.
There you go. That was Nathan and Wayne from Obliterati Press, and since recording that interview, I've recently started reading The Baggage Carousel, the latest release we mentioned there, and I can confirm it is brilliant. Laugh out loud funny, fresh and original, and the author, Dave Olner, will be on the show in a few weeks. It's out right now and I highly recommend it. Okay, so that wraps things up for another week, but don't forget you can find the entire back catalogue of interviews on the website. Also, take a moment to leave a quick iTunes rating and review. Like books, podcasts do thrive on reviews, so if you want to support the podcast for free, head over to iTunes or Apple Podcasts, as everyone calls it now. In the meantime, thanks for listening. I'm Wayne Kelly, happy writing and reading, and I'll see you next time.
Joined up writing.